السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah ta'ala, as usual, a quick reminder, inshallah, and then if there's any questions, we can try to go through them, inshallah. As we have been talking before we stopped, about the different roles that a Muslim woman would have in her life, being a mother, being a daughter, being a sister, being a wife, and so on. And this is something that we have all evidences and ayat of the Quran and hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that shows us how the women at the time of the Prophet ﷺ received the revelation from Allah and how to act according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. And when we talked before about the being a mother, and how there, as they say, behind every or the reason for any great man, there is a woman that is basically the means for him, and it's usually the mother, the wife, and so on. And in many cases, when people they are upon something great and changes the ummah, even it is not one person, and it's not the objective of one person, but it's a collective effort. And that's why, as communities, when everyone do their work, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, and we have obligations to observe. And even for any work, if people build a structure, or if they have something, there's so many different people they work. Many of them are not known, but it might be that it's attributed to the owner or to the head of the company or something like this. But in reality, it's more than just one person, and no one would see themselves as if they done nothing. So to understand this is through the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we look at how these great men, especially that are in the Quran and in the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, you would find how their mothers raised them and how they raised these men that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them the ones to till today that we mention their names and we learn from their examples. And there are so many, Safiya radiallahu anha, the aunt of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, her son was Az-Zubayr ibn al-Awwam, and he's the warrior of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And as Umar radiallahu anhu, he says that he's equal to 1,000 men. One man is sufficient for 1,000 men. When he sent him as aid to one of the armies of the Muslimin, and he wrote to Amr ibn al-As, and he was the leader of the army that he sent to him as Zubayr ibn al-Awam. He says, when he wrote the message for him, he says, أما بعد فإني أمددتك بأربعة آلاف رجل على كل ألف رجل منهم مقام الألف, that I sent to you 4,000. With every 1,000 there is a man that is equal to 1,000. الزبير بن العوام, المقداد بن عمرو, عبادة بن الصامت, ومسلمة ibn Khalid. These four, each one of them is equal to 1,000 men. And Umar radiallahu anhu, he would not say these things as a way of exaggeration. He knew and he understood the level and the capacity of these men. And who's his mother again? Safiya bint Abd al-Muttalib, the aunt of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And the same one, Safiya radiallahu anha, she was the sister of Hamza radiallahu anhu. So, and then you have Urwa and the sons of Az-Zubayr. They were the sons of who? Asma bint Abi Bakr. Asma, the daughter of Abi Bakr radiallahu anhuma. And we need to learn about these individuals and these relationships, and to educate ourselves and our children with regarding to them. And if we go on and on with the companions radiallahu anhum, and you see how their mothers raised them, and how they were upon the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevated their levels, and not just the companions radiallahu anhum, but also those who came after them, the tabi'een and tabi'i tabi'een, whether they are leaders of ulama. Sufyan al-Thawri, for example, rahimahullah, one of the great ai and he had a madhab, rahimahullah, like the four madhab, but the students and those who carried the madhab, they were not as those who would carry the other four madhab. And someone that is from the great aim of as-salaf, Sufyan al-Thawri, rahimahullah. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah, he said about Sufyan al-Thawri, he said his mother, Sufyan, the mother of Sufyan al-Thawri, she said to him, "O my son, اطلب العلم, seek knowledge. وأنا أكفيك بمغزلي, and I would take care of you with my مغزل." And مغزل is the way that she would sew clothing and she would sell it so that he would have all the time to seek knowledge. So she would work and she would make him completely given all the time to seek knowledge. And she would advise him. And we probably heard this before. And she would say to him, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willed for these words to be preserved and for us to see. And for us to see nowadays what is being kept and preserved from the history of these individuals. Where she said to her son, يا بني إذا كتبت 10 أحرف, if you write 10 letters, فانظر, then look, هل ترى في نفسك زيادة في خشيتك وحلمك ووقارك؟ فإن لم تر ذلك فاعلم أنها تضرك ولا تنفعك. The mother of Sufyan al-Thawri, she said to him, every time you write 10 letters, then look at yourself. If you see increase in your fear of Allah, in your forbearance, in your waqar. Al-waqar is when someone is not in haste. This is personality. This is all about his conduct, how he conducts himself and his ibadah and worship of Allah. So the rights of Allah, the rights of the other human beings, of the human beings. She said, if you don't see increase in all of these things, then have the knowledge that what you learned is harming you and is not benefiting you. So teaching him from a very young age that al-ilm is what benefits the person, what reflects in his speech and actions. And that's why he reached what he reached. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed for him to have such a great woman to raise him in such a way. And if we go on with this, there are so many, with the examples of the early generations of Islam. All of that as a result of the mothers that used to advise them and raise them, and they had the objective. It's like a project, the project of one's life, how to take the means, because guidance is in the hands of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. How to take the means to raise children to be men that can change the world, that can be obedient to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, that are steadfast upon the deen of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. And with the love that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala has in the hearts of the mothers towards their children, that if it's directed to the love of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, that the concern is for these individuals to go to Jannah of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, this is how things will change. Like Imam al-Awza'i, rahimahullah, one of the great ai of this deen also, and there's so many different things that can be said about him. Imam al-Dhahabi, rahimahullah, in his book Siyar A'lam al-Nubala, when he mentioned something about him, that Imam al-Awza'i, he used to be orphan and poor. His father died when he was young, and he was poor. And the one that was taking care of him is his mother. She used to take him from one town to the other. تنقله من بلد إلى بلد. Right? For what reason? So that he would learn the knowledge of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, when one of the people, when he mentioned this, and he was saying that to his son, he said that al-muluk, or the kings, عجزت أن تؤدب أنفسها, was not able to rectify itself and its own children, offsprings. The same adab as the Awza'i rahimahullah, he had in himself. He says, ما سمعت منه كلمة قط فاضلة إلا احتاج مستمعها إلى إثباتها عنه. that means he always speak what is virtue. He's always say what is right and things like this. Praying the night prayer, reciting Quran, weeping for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is how they raise their children, right? Rabi'at al-Ra'i, one of the shuyukh, one of the famous teachers of Imam Malik rahimahullah, she spent on her son to teach him, as it's mentioned in the books of Asir, 30,000 dinars. That also her husband died in one of the battlefields. So he was martyred, نحسبه كذلك, and he left his wife and Rabi'at al-Rai. And she inherited from her husband this money, so she spent it on her son. Spend it on her son so that he can be raised to be one of the great people of knowledge. And this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again elevated their levels. Imam Malik rahimahullah, when he said, I said to my mother, should I go and write the knowledge to learn? So she said to him, تعال, come here. فالبس ثياب العلم. Wear the clothings of al-ilm. That means the people, the students of knowledge, they're not just going to wear anything. So she put the imama on him and the clothing that would give him the respect of what he's going to seek. And then she said to him, اذهب فاكتب الآن. Now go and read and write. So, and she would say to him, with regards to Rabi'a that we just mentioned him, she would say to him, اذهب إلى ربيعة فتعلم من أدبه قبل علمه. Go to Rabi'a, learn from his adab, from his manners before his knowledge. And of course, these words for Imam Malik rahimahullah to reach the level that he reached and to remember the words of his mother. We all have something to that extent, especially for those who are older. You oftentimes you would remember that your parents said this to you, your father said this to you, your mother said that to you, and you still remember it till today. And maybe that when you were young, you didn't act upon it, but you realize that how true what that is, that the statement that they mentioned. Not just the same thing, but this is something that we need to pass on to our children, and never to think that if they're not acting upon what we're saying, it's waste. No, it is not waste, but to make sure that we're consistent and we are doing the best we can. And even if they're not listening or they're not following, especially when they grow up a little bit, it's something eventually, inshallah ta'ala, by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, would resonate into them. So, and this is how we learn from them. The same thing with the mother of Al Imam al Shafi'i, and so on. So the matter is, the list is a long list. Almost every one of the Imam of the Deen, search and look, you would find a great mother that raised them, someone that was, the one that was one of the means for him to be in that level. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who are steadfast upon the deen of Allah. And when it comes to our children, as mentioned before, that once they are 7 years old, from 7 to 10, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask us about them, about how did we teach them, how did we raise them, because this is what the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, "Muru awladakum bis-salati wa hum abna'u sab'a." Command, teach, make sure that your children, they make their salah when they're 7 years old. So if this is from 7 to 10, وَضْرِبُوهُمْ عَلَيْهُمْ أَبْنَاءَ عَشْرٍ, and you prevent them, you hit them if they don't do it when they're 10 years old. So this is how the tarbiyah is, and this is just in one aspect, which is the salah, which is the most important thing. And if that is done, that will bring everything else with it, inshallah ta'ala. And you would see how people, when they are concerned towards their children, they would make sure that they would never miss a day of school, they would never miss this and that, which is no problem in this. But what are we planting in them? Is the concern of this worldly life, and that's it, or the hereafter? Which is more important in their life, their salah or seeking provisions and making money and things like this? And that doesn't have to be that means they don't make money or they become lazy. No, but that's what's the most important thing in their life, what's they're created for, and to keep on and helping them with these matters, and to put things in the right perspective, and to teach them the meanings and the message of the deen of Islam, whether it's matters of belief, matters of ibadah. If it's boys versus girls, what raise a boy to be a man, to be a strong man that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have responsibilities upon him to fulfill the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, versus a girl that grows up to be a mother, to be a woman that is obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that understand her job in this life, not what the evil ones are trying to make her to be. Because this is a battle that we have to face, the battle of Iblis, and what Iblis do to adorn the evil to people, versus what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. And you see how things are, and it's very clear. And many, even with it, which is a sad thing, among us as Muslims, among also those who are religious or appears to be religious, they're being affected by the ways of Iblis nowadays when it comes to relaxing the matters of al-hijab, when thinking that al-ikhtilat or mixing it something is okay, and they will even bring evidences to it. It's all because of the defeatism within. They don't want to look strange in the environment that they're in, and that works with the ways of Iblis. You would see, and the gatherings and things of that nature, and the hijab, and we need to understand what is the meaning of a tabarruj, which is to show the zina, to show the beauty to the men and things like this. And this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade. It's not a piece of cloth. It's according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. Not according to what men they say or this and that, but according to the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And this is one of the major sins in the deen of Islam. That the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam would take the pledge of women when they embrace Islam with regards to at-tabarruj, showing any zina, showing any beauty or adornment to strangers. As the hadith of Umayma bint Ruqayqa, she went to the Prophet ﷺ to be a Muslim, to bayu' al-Islam. So he would say, "Ubayu'uki, I will give you the pledge of Islam, على ألا تشركي بالله, that you don't commit shirk, ولا تسرقي, ولا تزني, ولا تقتلي ولدك, and so on, ولا تتبرجي, تبرج الجاهلية, and that you don't make the tabarruj of the jahiliyyah that is mentioned in the Quran. That this is one of the principles of the deen, in the same context when he is taking her into the deen of Islam. She's coming to be a Muslimah, and he's taken from her that to stay away from the tabarruj, showing the zina, showing the adornment as the ways of the jahiliyyah. What is the tabarruj of al-jahiliyyah? As Abdullah ibn Abbas, he said that the women would show some of their hair, would show their necks, the V-neck of their clothing would show their necks, and part of their upper chest like this, their foot and a little bit of their shin, the golden bracelets on their legs, these types of things. This is even the tabarruj of nowadays is never heard of. Never heard of, even in the environments and the societies of the disbelievers and before, and things like this, let alone the Muslim environments. So this is something that, and one of the things that human beings can degrade themselves so much into a lower level if they get acquainted with the evil and they see it every day, then it becomes at ease with them. But we have the criteria to follow, which is the Quran and the Sunnah, the way it was at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And these types of hadith or these types of ayat of the Quran is not to make things difficult, but it's to bring us the purity of our hearts and to be steadfast upon the deen of Allah. There's the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and this is a sound hadith by Imam al-Tabarani and others. He said, سيكون في آخر أمتي نساء كاسيات عاريات. They will be, because it's never heard of even among the mushrikat, among the disbelieving women at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So he said it's going to be at the end of times, in my ummah, women kasiyatun ariyat. They're kasiyat, they're covered, but they are ariyat, naked. على رؤوسهن كأسنمة البخت. On their heads is like the hump of the camel. إلعنوهن فإنهن ملعونات. Curse them because they are cursed. That means they make hairstyles and things like this. Right? So the other hadith, which is and it's also a sound hadith in Musnad Imam Ahmad, which is one of the hadith that are amazing. He says the hadith of Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As رضي الله عنهما قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول, I heard the messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم saying, سيكون في آخر أمتي. Again, it's going to be towards the end of times, the later generations of my ummah. رجال يركبون على سروج كأشباه الرجال. Men that are riding on suruj, riding on things. It's which is not something that is seen at the time of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, but they are not real men. ينزلون على أبواب المساجد. Allah knows best if these are the cars or not. We don't interpret a hadith according to what we see in our lifetime. But they would come down by the gates of the masajid. So they're riding on things that the Prophet ﷺ did not mention that these are cattle or camels or horses. No, it's suruj. What they put on top of the camels, where they used to sit in, covered. So they would come down on the doors of the masajid. So they're coming to the masajid. ينزلون على أبواب المساجد. نساؤهم, their wives or the women in their life, كاسيات عاريات. They're covered, but in reality they are naked. They're not covered. على رؤوسهن كأسنمة البخت العجاف. The same thing. They're on their heads is like the hump of the camel. إلعنوهن فإنهن ملعونات. Curse them because they're cursed. لو كانت وراءكم أمة من الأمم لخدمنا نساؤكم نساءهم كما يخدمنكم نساء الأمم قبلكم. That if there's an ummah after this ummah, your women would be servants to them as a result of the humiliation when they disbelieved, or I'm sorry, when they disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so this is an evil characteristics. And this is one of the things especially for, again, special actions when it comes to the women and the responsibility of the men to make sure that this is something that they are guarding when it comes to their households. And as the hadith of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, صنفان من أهل النار, two types of the people of the hellfire, لم أرهما, I did not see them. That means they were not present at the time of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. They would come later. The first one, قوم معهم سياط كأذناب البقر يضربون بها الناس. People that they have whips like the tails of the cows, hitting people with it. Going after people, hitting them with it. ونساء كاسيات عاريات مميلات مائلات. Women covered, but they're not. مميلات مائلات. They walk in a way to bend their way of walking. رؤوسهن كأسنمة البخت المائلة, like the hump of the camel. لا يدخلن الجنة ولا يجدن ريحها. They would not enter Jannah and they would not get the fragrance of Jannah. وإن ريحها لا يوجد من مسيرة كذا وكذا. And the Jannah, its fragrance of it is to be received from this distance, this and this. So this is how things are. And this is the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is what is best for us. So whether a person living at times when it's not the norm or environment or whatever, it's not because of the deen of Allah. It's because of the evil actions of the people. So we have to be patient and we have to remind one another with the patience of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu, when he was in Hajj, and there was a woman, it was said عليها حبائر, which is الحبائر is like new clothing, ثوب حبير, that means new, وخواتيم, and rings, and she just had her hand outside of the hawdaj, which is where they put on top of the camel to cover. So he said, while we were with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam في هذا الشعب, while we were with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this valley, he said to us, انظروا هل ترون شيئا. He said to us, look, do you see anything? فقلنا نرى غربانا فيها غراب أعصم. We see crows, among them is the غراب أعصم, red crow. And al-A'sam is the one, the Ahmar, actually, when they say Ahmar, they don't really refer to the red color. But al-Ghurab al-A'sam is the rare type of crow where the wings are white or the legs are white. So he has two colors like this. So which not the norm of the crows. So he said we see crows, and among them one like that. فقال, so the Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said لا يدخل الجنة من النساء إلا من كان منهن مثل هذا الغراب في الغربان. He said that the women, those who will enter Jannah, is like this غراب, like this crow from the rest of the crows. As you see, this is that means to prepare oneself not to be from the majority, but rather to prepare oneself and to be at ease and no problem with being, you're not the norm, right? Because the fitan and the ways of Iblis and the ways even among the Muslimin themselves, right? How they would be easily redefining things according to their desires. What is the hijab nowadays? Is pants is part of the hijab? Is showing the hair and showing the shoulders and showing part of the arm and wearing tight clothings and all these types of things and makeup. All of these things is haram, and this is a way to have mercy towards one another and to protect one another from the hellfire. And unless the heart has that full purity and the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that requires patience and requires to be at ease with the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to have satisfaction in being at home and to raise our children and to be content with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us. All these types of things, this is all the outcome of it, inshallah ta'ala, is what is best. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from the evil within our own selves. And inshallah ta'ala, we'll continue inshallah ta'ala next time. From your questions, it gives me also an idea of some of the topics that we need to talk about it in details, inshallah. So if the answer is not thoroughly enough, inshallah, we'll discuss these matters, inshallah. As long as we're consistent, inshallah, in these sessions, inshallah, hopefully I can be consistent, inshallah. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وصحبه وسلم سبحانك اللهم ربنا وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله